Yes, thank you. Welcome, Mr. Rudy Dix. We really want to hear your opening comments as the head of Operation Vulindlela, so that honorable members, as we sit to listen, receive your presentation. This is something that's very close to the heart of the committee, particularly the role of the DSU, which sits within the presidency under Operation Vulindlela. And I think we really look forward to you giving us context about why is the DSU sitting there. And then obviously, as you will hand over to Kula in terms of then what is the progress around the digital transformation reforms that OV has initiated.
Absolutely, Chair, and thank you again. My apologies, I had connection problems with my laptop, so I'm just quickly connecting with my phone temporarily, and I'll join it once I reboot that. But as you've asked, Honourable Chair, Honourable Members, Minister, and DG, colleagues, correctly so, the digital transformation falls under the Operation Vulindlela program. Operation Vulindlela program was, of course, an initiative between the Presidency and National Treasury, launched in 2020 October as a response to the COVID crisis, and as part of the Economic Reconstruction and Recovery Plan, Honourable Chair. The focus of OVI was, of course, to unlock, or in a sense, unblock much of the critical areas that were in our control. And our focus was on the 5 key network sectors that we felt was important. That was energy, electricity, logistics, water, visa reforms, and telecommunications. What's of interest, of course, to this portfolio committee during the 6th administration, one of the key outcomes was, of course, the ability for us to move as quickly as possible to shift from analog to digital and to manage that switch off with the department. More importantly, of course, the ability for us to be able to finally auction the spectrum to allow greater and enhanced investments both in 4G and, more importantly, 5G technologies by the MNOs. Operation Vulindlela Phase 1 came to an end at the end of the 6th administration, Honourable Chair, and we had really then relaunched Phase 2, which was adopted in May in this year, by Cabinet. And Phase 2 really took forward 4 of the regional areas, that is electricity reform, logistics, water. The visa 1 is, in a sense, complete, as the department has now officially launched the electronic travel authorization. You will see we've added 3 additional reforms, Honourable Chair. The first, of course, is the spatial inequality. The second area is, of course, the area related to local government. And this one in particular is to give a sense of the digital transformation roadmap and the work that we've done thus far, including updates that are there. So Operation Vulindlela is quite a critical and important part of government program to try and unlock and ensure ultimately what we want is inclusive growth and development. And that's what it is all about. With that sort of quick introduction, Honourable Chair, let me hand over to Kule. He's the Chief Director in my unit and responsible for driving the digital transformation roadmap under the leadership of the Minister, of course, and the IDWG, which is the Interdepartmental Working Group, chaired by, of course, the DG in the Presidency, DG Nonkobelo, Jordan Diani, and, of course, DG Dr. Duncan Peterson, the DG for National Treasury. Over to you, Kule.
Thank you, Rudy, and thank you to the Minister and the DG. And I'd like to greet the Honourable Chair and the Honourable Members. I hope the presentation is visible. I'll jump, honorable members, into the presentation and just give a little bit of the background as to the reason why we thought that the reforms were quite critical, especially under Operation Vulindlela, of course, working with the minister and the department. As we know, digital transformation in this area is a constantly evolving area of work, just given some of the technology innovations, and governments have been traveling this journey for some time, since in many instances the early 90s, where it was really around how do you have a basic online presence, especially from the type of departments. When we moved into the early 2000s, it was really about how do you offer online services that save people time, and then also make sure that we're communicating to the citizenry. And lastly, the area that we're in, especially when we look around at developing countries that have the imperative to develop not only and improve the socio-economic conditions of their people, we're seeing the fact that technology becomes an enabler of the improvement of those particular conditions. And so we think about how do we use technology in a manner that is, one, user-centric, speaks to where people are, is able to be scalable. So we move away from the situation where each department works for itself and really doesn't think about a whole government approach. And then, of course, how do we make sure that the technologies we're using are scalable, are interoperable in the sense that they're speaking to other government systems, and able to be reused, so that ultimately we're also able to save the resources of the citizenry and government going forward. This really brings us to an incredible piece of work that has been undertaken in places like Brazil and India and many other parts of the world. Estonia has also been mentioned, which is around this idea of digital public infrastructure. In the same way that you would think about roads and electricity, we need to think about the kind of digital components in the same way. Of course, this committee is well versed with the importance of data and hardware and what that enables. But really, the focus of the roadmap in large part is around what we call the shared infrastructure, or the soft infrastructure, which is namely that digital identity, the payments, and the data exchange that the minister spoke about. And we'll dive into that a little bit. If those are able to work together and across the government system, meaning that each department doesn't have its own payment system, own data, digital identity system, or data exchange system, it means that we can offer seamless services to citizens, and we're able to actually track how those citizens are affecting their lives, and also be able to recommend new services on the basis of information that we have of those particular citizens. There are places around the world where there has been immense, I think, economic value as a result of this. In Brazil, the ability to invest in digital public infrastructure has saved about $1 billion in that state. But also, I think more importantly, we've seen through the adoption of a single platform for government services, the gov.br, which has hundreds of services, that it is now easier for a Brazilian mother, father, son and daughter to be able to get a conditional cash grant that helps improve their educational health outcomes, and you're able to track that. So a child that gets the grant then has better health outcomes and better education outcomes. If we look at India, for example, 500 million people that use the UPI, which is India's digital payment system, used from rural areas to informal settlements across the country, the use of digital money that not only helps the government and the citizenry more generally be able to understand how much money is moving in the economy, but also at the same time allows small businesses, especially those that were not covered by traditional lending practices and banks, to be able to access financing, because we know that someone who's sitting on the side of the road who's selling, let's say, snacks and the likes, is actually moving 5,000 Rand a day. And so on the basis of that, you're able to make a better decision about whether that person should be catered going forward. Now, why is it critical that we undertake this particular journey? Because the reality of the situation, and we have our learning from this in in COVID-19 when we were deploying the SRD grant, which was not unique to South Africa. Many governments around the world had to figure out how to get social protection to millions of their people around the world. It challenged, I think, governments because normally how people would access those services was through a human interface, through going to an office. But obviously, because of those COVID regulations, the need to keep people safe, we had to do it electronically. And what we found was that, even though there are pockets of excellence, many of the systems are still slow and uncoordinated. There is also the risk of duplication and fraud within the system, and very outdated systems that are there. And so what this does, even though we were largely successful, is that there are particular people that should have benefited who didn't, or it maybe took longer than it should have. But also there's a high cost of making sure we can deliver when in fact there's easier ways of doing this. So this work is really about making sure that our systems are more reliable, they're accessible, especially to people. And I think the most important one is actually reducing the administrative burden and costs. I think we all have, as citizens of this republic, have experienced a situation where we must go to a government office, stand in a long line, get our documentation in that line. But I think we can also understand more deeply so that if you're talking about a poor South African who travels from a township, takes public transport, pays money, probably uses the same grant that the state has paid them, gets there, lines up all day, and then they find out they don't have the correct documentation and they must come back and do the same thing. That's a massive administrative burden and also financial burden that we're putting on citizens. And we think that there's a better way of doing that. And so in many ways, this slide speaks about some of the challenges, especially in the administrative data sets. If you look at just the social data sets, whether they sit at SASSA, the Department of Social Development, Stats SA, or whatever the case, these are siloed, about 15 different data sets that some speak to each other, but many don't speak to each other. And if you were able to connect these, and all of these sit in government, so these is information that citizens have already given you, you would have what we call a 360 degree of the citizen, a better view of the citizen, so that when the citizen goes and applies for a service, they don't have to fill in another form when that information already exists within the government system. While we've talked about reform, the reality of the situation is that South Africa is endowed with a lot of good legislation, we believe, especially when it comes to digital transformation, especially from the beginning of democracy. And so this is just to highlight that there's really a lot that we can build on, whether that is the national data and cloud policy, the digital payments roadmap that is already starting to be taken forward, the digital economy master plan. There's really a lot of, I think, good work that one can build in. This work, while there'll be areas of reform, perhaps legislative changes, regulation changes, the reality of the situation is that it is more about the implementation and leveraging the existing policy framework in order that we can move. I think what the slide really does very quickly is just maybe highlight some of those complexities that I spoke about earlier. I mean, if you compare us, and I think we've been quite intentional not to compare us to the developed world, even though we think we can match them if we really want to. But if you look at developing countries, whether it's India, it's Brazil, in the continent, the likes of Kenya, especially in East Africa, we can see that we are not performing as we should when it comes to the maturity of our GovTech, even our e-government index, especially from the likes of the UN. And certainly, I think we're even doing less when it comes to digital public infrastructure and making sure that all of these components are connected going forward. There's a number of reasons for this. I think the challenges are well known, perhaps, in this committee. The processes, the mechanisms, organizational mandates, all of those things are things where, perhaps some reforms are necessary. Technology, of course, is key to it. But the reality of the situation is that, having spoken with people who have implemented this in other settings, it is always people, right? It's the skill sets of people with, who are using the technology, people inside the government system. But also, when you are saying that the government departments must think about a whole government approach, it is a massive change management process. People have done things a particular way for a very long time. And the reality is that while an IT officer in a particular government department might think that it is imperative that the service that they offer speaks to the needs of a particular department, the reality of the situation is that the citizen looks at us as one government and expects us to offer a service in that nature. And so it really brings us to the roadmap, as the DG and the Minister had indicated, and which was approved by Cabinet in March 2025, and really lays out some of the key objectives when it comes to the next 5 years of implementation, what the key projects are, and then also what are the enabling factors going forward. The reality is that if you look at the roadmap, which we'll speak to, it's really about leveraging existing work within the government system, and then making sure that there is better integration so that we can actually get to a particular outcome that brings these services closer to citizens going forward. When we think about who we're delivering for, we think about the NDP 2030, and in there is the articulation of Thandi, perhaps the South African citizen that we must always think about. And of course, if we think about what we want to deliver, there is opportunities in education and training. So, for example, leveraging those digital tools to ensure that if Thandi were to apply for schooling opportunities, that she's got a digital document wallet that has a matric certificate, ID, and all. She doesn't have to keep going to a police station to get it stamped multiple times, use a lot of money trying to get onto taxis, having to track these physical documents. All of these can be made available to the education institution she's applying to, or the various bursaries. NSFAS comes to mind and the likes. The same is also in terms of entrepreneurship. She gets a degree. We understand that she comes from a particular background, and could you use, for example, AI-powered job matching, as we've seen in other parts of the world, to link her to job opportunities in government and beyond. And then also through her digital ID, it means no paperwork, no red tape, because we know who we are. We have existing information. This could also be extended to health and well-being. In places like the UAE, for example, you get you get reminders in terms of when you have to go see a practitioner, go to the clinic, and also, given the records that the state has on hand, especially the Department of Health, you're also able to say that if you need more checking than, let's say, the average citizen, especially if you've got some of those conditions. And then the idea is that all of this should really be had through a single digital platform. We found that there are countries that each department has had their own digital platform, and it has actually been quite a mess. And more countries are moving towards having a single platform where a citizen can interact, where they don't have to have multiple logins, passwords, and the likes. And there's actually one place that they can go and access this information. It really brings us, I think, to what we call for us the South Africa stack, or the technologies that will be key. The first one, the data exchange, and I'll speak to this in a bit, which really allows us to share data and information that citizens have given us in government harmlessly. So, for example, if one were to apply again for a SASSA support or some social protection, a government department can instantly, at very little cost, ask for that information from another department that might have your information, be it Home Affairs or whatever the case. At the moment, it's not an instant thing, and it often costs more money than it should. Digital payments, I've spoken about. It's about reducing the cost of our ability to pay people, especially the likes of the grants, but also at the same time, the ability for person-to-person payments or enterprise-to-enterprise payments, especially within the informal sector. The digital identity, which builds off our existing smart ID, is really around making sure that when you access these services, we know who you are and therefore able to offer you a better service, but also it reduces the fraud. So you don't have a situation where a person is applying for a government service 10 times using different digital identities or different forms of identity. And then lastly is just all of this then finds expression within the digital services component, which is what South Africans will be interacting with on a daily basis. The idea, the long term, beyond 2030, is really to build what we call a life cycle of services from the day that you're born to cradle. There are services that are on offer. The example that I always give is that if my wife and I were to have a baby tomorrow, you onboard that at the hospital. They know who the parents are. They know where we live, and when that child must go for immunization, notification is sent, similar to your SARS e-filing, and the child is able to get those necessary shots. When schooling comes up, it is not a situation of standing in a long line with many documents, trying to find them. All of that is ready, available, and it makes the process even more seamless, and you can take that to its natural conclusion going forward. There are a number of key initiatives that we need to highlight that are articulated in the roadmap. The first one, of course, is the functional digital ID and the universal biometrics. Currently, we have the smart ID, which has your fingerprints, your retina, all of those things. And so it's a matter of just building on top of that. And when you access that service, we can actually verify that you are who you are. And then, of course, we talked about a digital wallet, which is maybe similar to what maybe many honorable members might have on their phone, which is when they leave their house, they have a banking card. They're able to tap that thing. But imagine this, that if you had that, for example, and you had your ID, your driver's license, a whole bunch of critical documentation that a citizen requires to access services. The data exchange I've spoken about, but really the key thing there is that even as policymakers, it allows us to have, I think, a more dynamic view of the changing considerations and I think appetites of citizens. Citizens are constantly dynamic, and we still make policy as if they are the same people that were there in 1995 or 2000 or so on. And this is a massive portal in that. The digital payments, as we've said, making sure that they're instant, they're effortless, they're cost effective, and also they're safe, because there is a cost of carrying cash. We understand that there's still going to be the role of cash in the economy for some time. And that we get, but certainly we've seen settings where the inequalities are high, where there is an inequality in terms of access to data and the likes, but people are still using digital money. And East Africa, for example, on the continent, is perhaps some of the leader in that, where people easily transact using their cell phones and very basic for cell phones to do that as well. And we think it's something that we can leverage. And then finally, making sure that the trusted channel is zero rated so that people can access it. And then, of course, internally in the government system, making sure that we have what we call an integrated human resource management system. Each department still has their own human resources system. And in fact, we should be one government, and that helps save costs. If we really look at this is really a whole government approach, and I think it's important to really emphasize that. The first one is to say that, on digital identity, given the mandate, the Home Affairs really leads with that, with support from National Treasury and the South African Reserve Bank. And again, that work is underway. In terms of the data exchange, National Treasury leads with Stats SA, of course, working very closely with SASSA. Digital payments, that sits largely at the Reserve Bank, but of course, from a policy perspective, National Treasury leads. And then also on digital services, the Department of Communications and Digital Technology, the Department of Public Service Administration, and then the Digital Services Unit in the Presidency. The role of the Digital Services Unit in the Presidency is a coordination role. It is not meant to, I think, duplicate any existing work or structures within the government system. The reality of the situation is, having gone to those countries that we spoke about and trying to understand how they drove what is a very complicated change management process, one of the first advice that we got was that it was quite key that kind of coordination mechanism sit in the center of government, because as we know, departments have difficulty listening to other departments in some instances. So that really becomes one of the key mechanisms as well. When we come into the benefits of the key initiatives, I've spoken to this to some degree. But for example, if we look at India's ADHA system, for example, they didn't have a national ID system until 2017. we saw that they were saving the Indian government about $12 billion in fraudulent benefit claims. Now, we're a smaller country, but certainly I think it's a good example to use. Brazil, we've spoken about the savings of IT systems of about $1 billion, especially when the data exchange was introduced. The payment system cost about $4 million in Brazil to develop, but there's a cost savings in the economy of about 5.7 billion. Also, just the amount of fraud that it reduces is quite key. And in having one central platform moves us away from having a huge amount of websites, duplicative apps and systems and services, and that also in itself cuts not only the amount of resourcing the government is putting in, but at the same time reduces also the manual work that we have to do as a government and also people in terms of navigating all of these sites. I've spoken in some sense about the Digital Services Unit. It sits in the presidency under OV. I think it is really to aid that coordination and implementation. It is to work, of course, with the various IDWG work streams. The DG had spoken about the Interdepartmental Working Group as well, and departments, of course, responsible for their own systems and policy. It is meant to be a small team of people who are supporting departments, but also where need be, also making sure that those areas that are not being picked up by departments we're running with. Those things that also are more South Africa Inc., beyond just one particular department, there'll also be a particular role that the DSU plays there as well. And then, of course, if we look at the structure, it's still being built. It's really about making sure that you have that technical ability, the ability to have someone who's running with partnerships, operations, and also looking at some of the technology components as well going forward. Sorry if I can. Here, in terms of the structure, we've spoken about that, about why it's important that it sits within the presidency. There are a number of examples around the world. Brazil, also that coordination mechanism. It's not the builds mechanism, but rather and it is not the procurement mechanism, but rather the coordination mechanism sits in the center. That is also done in the Republic of Turkey. Our neighbors in Zambia also themselves in the SADC region have a similar model. And then, of course, also in places like Argentina, where they've made some important strides. In terms of the background here, just to emphasize again a whole of government approach, the Department of Communications and Digital Technology plays that important role of coordination and implementation, especially on the e-service, the enablers, but also the coordination of the IMC and the IDWG as a whole. The presidency, of course, we've spoken about that to some degree in terms of the Department of Finance funding, but also running with the data exchange. And then there are other key departments like Home Affairs and the digital identity, social development, which becomes quite important because they become a use case for much of the implementation, given the fact that we want this to have a very real impact on the millions of South Africans that are dependent on our social protection programs, but also we must do it in a way that has the necessary guardrails and safeguards so that we are not risking any problems. Higher education is also quite important, just given the amount of people that are there. And then, of course, basic education, where I think the digitization of key documents becomes quite key. Now, we've spoken to some length about the various governance mechanisms inside, so I will not spend too much time there, but this is just to say that all of this and the various components of technology that are being developed is to make sure that we have that seamless integration that citizens are able to use. Now, the roadmap is we've been implementing the roadmap for some degree. The idea of 2025 was that it was always supposed to be a year where we were setting some of the, let's say, key areas of delivery, setting them up. And then, of course, the idea was that in 2026, 2027, 28 and beyond, that some of these things were going to come online. But we're happy to indicate that there has been some successes. Of course, the adoption of the roadmap is an important one. The various governance mechanisms that are working, the establishment of the digital service units from a coordination perspective, the Mzansi exchange, which is the data exchange layer that allows us to move information across government quickly, is now a pilot has been launched. It is working closely with the likes of SASSA and SFAS to make sure that we can actually start to test it. And then the other one is that the payments ecosystem modernization work through the South African Reserve Bank also working well. A lot of that work was actually dependent on the South African Reserve Bank's 50% acquisition of PayShap, which allows for seamless services, and we understand that the Competition Commission has given their thumbs up there. There are a number of modernized gov.za websites under development. A self-service mobile app prototype is now up and running. It is real, and it's really about how we, I think, make sure that we're scaling it up into next year so that it is in people's hands. There is alignment that has taken place with the likes of the electronic travel authorization by the Department of Home Affairs to make sure that even though it is working independently now, but at a longer term, it integrates into that self-service mobile application that will be in the hands of all citizens. And then also exploring what partnerships look like, including within government. Of course, CETA plays quite an important role, but also including the likes of the CSIR, but also looking beyond. And when you talk about partnerships, we're not talking about contractual relationships, because a big part of the roadmap is also about building capacity within the state to execute. The reality of the situation is that the state does not have the amount of professionals, especially in an IT environment, that it requires. We need a lot more, and the country as a whole needs a lot more. So building that capacity is an important aspect of it. However, we also recognize that we're not working in a siloed ecosystem. We have a big both civil society and private sector, which is quite advanced in their thinking around digital technologies and how do we leverage some of that going forward. To bring it to identity as well, there's I'll just highlight a few things here. That is just to say that we expect that the functional digital ID will really come into play early next year. Again, as a country, we actually have a bit of an easier way of getting to it because we already do have an ID system which covers 99.8% of the population. And then in addition to that, also we have the Smart ID system, which has many of those biometrics. So making sure that the rest of the citizenry gets that Smart ID is quite important, and that's an important enabler of making sure that we can get to the Smart ID system. There is work that Home Affairs is taking across where they're continuing to align with various departments onto the role of the Smart ID. The SARB is also playing an important role in terms of making sure that they are building a secure digital wallet. I spoke about the importance of the wallet in terms of holding the documents. And then, of course, there is some prototypes about linking that piece of work to the self-service mobile app so that it becomes a reality for people going forward doing that. As we look into 2026, it will be quite important to use the Smart ID in various pilots that look at job search, that look at other verified credentials that will be linked to your Smart ID. So that means linking your driver's license, your matric certificate, all of that to your Smart ID, so that if your Smart ID is used and it's scanned, you know that all of those documents actually exist going forward as well. But the big focus, of course, as you will see across this update slide, is just making sure that we're first focusing on social protection, and it's linked to education outcomes and also employment outcomes going forward. On the data exchange, we've indicated that the pilot has been launched. A big piece of work here is just making sure that the various legal frameworks are in place, even though we've been able to move very quickly with the likes of SASSA now also with NSFAS who will come on board. Other departments are just need that kind of governance framework, various data sharing agreements, and clear rules about how these are going to be used and how those safeguards. And when we talk about safeguards, we're just talking about being POPIA compliant, making sure, of course, that people's data is safe going forward. So a lot of that work has started where perhaps, even though the outcome is now in Q2 2026, is just making sure that we are also linking it to the enrollment of learners. Again, pilot phase, not something that would start in Q2, but just an acknowledgement of how critical the data exchange will be, especially in the onboarding of students to study, but also in their day-to-day lives. The third one is really around payments. We've spoken here about the fact that the SARB, of course, backed by National Treasury, leads much of this work going forward. Some of the key things to really highlight, especially as it comes to 2026, is making sure that we can build that enterprise to enterprise or government to people system, payment system for the child support grant and the SRD 370 grant. This is a priority for us, and already that work, integration work between the work that the SARB is doing, the work that is being led on the digital ID in Home Affairs, is that integration is actually starting to happen, because as we recognize, we make payments to 26 million South Africans, and if you can actually get this right, it means that it is seamless, it is easy to do, but also at the same time, we've got a central government-owned payment system that is cheaper for government to operate. And it also speaks to this thing of data sovereignty. Much of our key digital infrastructure is still owned by the private sector, and it becomes quite important. Now, we're not saying that we're against the private sector. All that we're saying is that it is quite key that that key infrastructure is owned by ourselves as the state, obviously as a custodian on behalf of the South African citizenry. But certainly the private sector can build on that. And it really becomes about building payment gateways for other use cases, including the DigiGov, which is that integrated human resource system that can be used within the government system, and then also extending it to other use cases as well. On digital service, as we've indicated, a pilot for the mobile app is there. Linkages, of course, the first services that we foresee around grants and labor components as well. And then, of course, just making sure that we bring some of the key services that can be tested onto the system by the December of this year. And we've started working with some of them, but scaling them up into 2026 as well. Making sure that we're also, because while the app is important, the websites also have a particular role themselves. So making sure that we have one integrated website. I mean, if you really go into many other countries, government portal, they'll look and feel whether you're dealing with the Department of the Treasury or you're dealing with the DCDT. It all looks and feels the same, and you only have to log in once, and then you can really access a plethora of services. And we started working with GCIS as the owner of the gov.za platform to move that. We've already got existing what we call squads, technical squads that are starting to integrate systems going forward. The idea, as we've said, is to make sure that we can launch that platform come Q2 2026, make sure that we zero rate the platform, and we're happy to say that the application to ICASA around zero rating that platform has already been made. And then I think the big one to really monitor for this committee is that as we go into Q4 2027, we really want to be looking at about 20 priority services across government that are in the hands of citizens through a central platform going forward. And then to have a complete migration of all government websites into one integrated gov.za platform, which is also aligned with the app, is going to be quite important. This again is just to speak about the app because much has been said about it publicly. but indicated again, it really is about a single reusable service flow. And luckily, it is really, we've learned from other countries, don't have a million applications for government services, have one central one that doesn't confuse citizens and also saves the resources of government so that you can constantly improve this thing going forward. Again, I would implore the honorable members to look at the gov.br, which is Brazil's central app that covers services from the federal government down to the state level, down to the municipal level across Brazil, and it is used by over 100 million people every month on a month-to-month basis to access a plethora of services. It did not start as a services portal that had all of those services. It started with 1, 2, 3, 4. You build the trust. You constantly improve, and then you really get to that level. And for us, it's a good example because it is, of course, a peer country, as we all know. So at the moment, we're running the pilot. As we look into Q1, have a limited public release, especially after April, that looks at whether it is on the social protection services, the employment aspects as well, integrating some of the work that's happened through sayouth.mobi, and then of course NSFAS becomes quite key, and then moving into Q2 of the financial year next year, looking at a particular public launch, making sure it's zero rated, and then from 2026 to 2027, really focusing on those 20 priority services that are key for South African citizens. And then the last thing I'll just say here, Chairperson, is that before the roadmap began, we were working with partners to interview South Africans, whether in rural or urban settings, to see what are the services that they think would be most essential for them. It's an important thing to state, because then the roadmap is not just led by officials in government who think that they can speak on behalf of citizens, but rather is led by those really critical interviews and conversations that were had with citizens around what day-to-day do they need, and what can be streamlined going forward. Thank you, Chairperson, and thank you, honorable members.
Thank you, Kule, and thank you to the team. Let me just check if there are any additions from your side, Rudy, before we open the platform to honorable members to engage. Okay, honorable members, we've received a much-awaited presentation. Thank you so much to yourself, Kule, and to the team for the presentation from the Office of the President on Operation Vulindlela, from the DSU unit for your presentation. Honorable members, we now have the opportunity to engage the presentation, and I will now look for hands on the platform. Honorable Bodlani, let me recognize you first.
Shanya Vela Lab. I don't know, maybe Mr. Kule can put down the presentation. Thank you so much. Oh, I know that I'm visible, Chair. Thank you so much, Chairperson. Really do welcome the presentation. Very informative. I think this interaction with this presentation is really something that has been long overdue, and the information really does capacitate the portfolio committee. So really, really appreciate it. Chair, perhaps maybe let me start with the criticism around Operation Vulindlela. There's some who have said that the reforms are slow. What would be the response from the team on that? Do they think we are moving at a pace that is adequate, or are there any plans to really increase the momentum? And I'm not too sure if one gets a sense that there is complete buy-in of this project. I think for me, the integration of government services is something that I've always said. I've always said that having a government that works in silos is expensive, unnecessary, and just delays the progress for South Africans. But also looking at this presentation, one does not really get a sense that there is complete an absolute buy-in from the sectors. And I know we have heard about the working with the Department of Home Affairs, Department of Basic Education. But what I'm also wanting to know is, at local level, is the buy-in? Are we having conversations with, for example, SALGA as the custodian of local government? Does local government, as the interface with our citizens, understand and have a buy-in into this? And what is being done to ensure that local government understands the agency of this? Because we have said in this portfolio committee, where we have entities that are infrastructure entities telling us problems about, for example, getting way bills for the municipalities to start their work. So is the team doing enough to ensure that municipalities, as an example, really understand the importance of coordination and integration of processes? And, the story of Tanji, it's really unfortunate that in South Africa, there's really a few and far in between Tandis that we can speak of. And this is because while we speak about advancement of digital literacy, so many other people are falling through the cracks. And it really has not even become an issue of those in the rural areas, because those are the hardest hit in terms of falling through the cracks. So we are moving with so many forward, but we are also leaving behind so many other people. So what would be the response to that assertion? And how do we make sure that as we advance, the digital divide does not widen? Is Vulindlela, Operation Vulindlela, able to give us that confidence that as we advance, we are bringing everybody along? And if we are not bringing everybody along at this point, what needs to be done to make sure that we bring everybody along? That a 6-year-old is able to do coding, like in other countries that were mentioned today here, where they have clearly better coordination than ourselves. And when we talk about CIOs, we have GCIS as a custodian of Chief Operation Officers, and this is just how I understand the process. Are we doing enough to really capacitate them? Again, do we also have their buy-in? Because this is one of those positions that really require people to really be visionaries if we are going to then take Operation Vulindlela forward. So do they have capacity? What are you doing to capacitate them? Che, I'm not sure how Operation Vulindlela interfaces with DCDT. Are they also housed in the department? If they are not housed in the department, how is the interaction managed? And the way that it is being managed, do they think that it is sufficient? And if it is not housed in DCDT or having a representative in DCDT, what would be the reason for that? And I think on the issue of data protection, obviously we all agree that banks, for example, are private businesses. And Mr. Kule made it as a passing remark, the issue of data sovereignty. How do we balance that? If you could just unpack for us how he thinks that could be balanced, because the reality is that we had organizations such as post offices that had a great footprint within the country, but we know the story of post office. And now private sector is stepping in where government institutions could have really been better placed to really provide, fill that gap for service delivery. And what interactions, perhaps as I am on the post office, what interactions, if at all, is Vulindlela, Operation Vulindlela, doing to really support organizations such as specifically Post Bank, having a post office, I do beg your pardon, having that footprint to say we don't build up industries when others are failing. We therefore capacitate already on what the state has as in terms of infrastructure, as opposed to going to banks. And I'm just making that as an example to make my point. and I really hope my point is made. With the GCIS and Operation Vulindlela, Mr. Kule speaks about a squad. And the question was going to be, how much outsourcing does Operation Vulindlela do? So let me maybe phrase it differently. The squad that he refers to is a GCIS employees. Are we making sure that the capacity remains within the state? Because this is another problem where we capacitate people and people leave. And obviously people will leave because they do want greener pastures. That is unavoidable. But for institutional knowledge and building institutional capacity, how is this being handled? What is being outsourced in our sector? And what are we doing to ensure that what we cannot do, we build that skill and bring it back into the sector? I'll stop there, Chairperson, and really thank you. But maybe as a last point, Chair, the issue. I'm not sure who's speaking, but the point I wanted to make, Chairperson, is that this week or last week, we saw reports of low literacy rates coming from research based on basic education, that the literacy levels of South African children remain low. How, and again, to the point I was making about leaving people behind, where does Operation Vulindlela come in to ensure that those sort of things are conversations of the past? We do not talk about low literacy rates and in terms of reading, but then at some point we are going to also need to talk about low literacy rate in terms of the use of the internet and related services. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Honorable Bodlani. May I please request members to check your devices? I think Mr. Ramusi, whether you are in control of your device, but there seems to be some sounds coming from your phone, from your device. Can I please request all guests and attendees to be mindful of your devices? Thank you. Honorable Telisha, can I invite you?
Thank you very much, Chairperson. Please allow me to have my video off the device. Good morning to you, Chair, and my colleagues and everyone in the call. I must admit, Chair, that this is indeed a very comprehensive and well-structured presentation on digital transformation plans. However, it is of critical concern, Chairperson, that the document repeatedly names the National Treasury as a lead or co-lead department for these critical initiatives. The Reserve Bank also is named as a key player. This then, Chair, frames digital transformation primarily as a fiscal and financial efficiency project, rather than a public service and the social justice. In my view, this raises the risk.
Honorable Telisha, can I please trouble you? Mr. Ramusi, your device is still Mr. Matubi Ramusi. Thank you. Honorable Telisha, you may continue.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. I'm saying, in my view, this raises the risk of policy being driven by cost cutting and private financial sector interest, right? So my question then, can we remove these people, Chairperson, who are disturbing us in our meeting?
Yes, please. Can I request admin to remove?
Can they be removed? Because clearly they're not part of this meeting.
We'll do that, Chairperson.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. So my question then, Chair, is why is it that it's the National Treasury and the Ministry of Finance leading such a citizen-facing identity and the data project instead of departments like Home Affairs or even Social Development? Another interest is knowing the extent of the banking sector's involvement in the payments ecosystem modernization, and how will we prevent them from imposing transaction fees on recipients of grant, Chairperson. And the document also mentions a public-private ecosystem and partnerships, but it provides no detail. There's no detail on the nature of these partnerships. And this always is a red flag for me in terms of a potential corporate capture, if I may put it that way. It makes me wonder if companies like the banks, like your MTN, Vodacom, and international tech giants will be building and managing the core state infrastructure. So I would like the clarity on that, Chairperson. Why is there no detail on the nature of this partnership and public-private ecosystem that the document is talking about? And maybe, Chair, the department should maybe provide us with a full list of the prospective private sector partners, and maybe the current and the current ones as well for each work stream, right? Because we don't know. I think it is of interest that we should know, should be provided with the full list of these current and prospective private sector partners for each of these work stream. And also if maybe they can tell us what tender processes were or will be used to select these partners. And maybe lastly, Chair, it is my interest in knowing who will own the intellectual property and the data generated by these platforms. Will it be the state, or will it be these private partners that they're talking about? And maybe another one, Chair. So they speak of the vision of Thandi, right? And the vision of Thandi assumes universal access to a smartphone, reliable electricity, and the digital literacy. For millions of South Africans, Chairperson, this is not a reality. The zero-rated platforms are a good step. I'm not saying they are not a good step, but they are insufficient if people lack, devices or even the skill to use them. So I want to know maybe if there is or there are any parallel or non-digital strategy, to ensure that, the citizens without smartphones or digital literacy, they are not excluded from the essential services, because we still have, people who receive grants, and they will not be excluded from education and healthcare. And maybe, Chair, beyond the zero rating, I'm interested in knowing what other investments are being made in public access points, like community centers and libraries. Do we have trained staff there to assist these people that I am talking about? And Chair, maybe my last point here is that the document is framed around the cost saving and efficiency. And this is important. I'm not saying it is not. But this is a framing that can lead to job losses, especially in the public sector. So I just want to know, Chair, if government has conducted any employment impact assessment for this digital transformation, like how many public service jobs are projected to be lost due to this automation that we are talking about, and with the billions that will be saved as projected in the international examples. I just am interested to know where they will be reinvested. Maybe let me put it like that. Where would these be reinvested? Will they be reinvested in expanding social services? Where will they go? Thank you very much, Chairperson.
Thank you, Honorable Telisha. Honorable Singh.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, I would also like to just, and perhaps being new to this committee as well, maybe I might have missed it in the past, but I would actually like to have absolute clarity on the relationship between Operation Vulindlela and the DCDT in terms of the roles and responsibilities to make sure that there are no overlapping mandates and we know exactly who is responsible for what and who is meant to be accountable for what, who we can hold accountable for what. Because thank you very much for the presentation um, to the team from Operation Vulindlela, and it gives us a lot of information. But when you look at the presentation, it's not just telling me exactly what the team from there is doing to support DCDT in terms of specifically their mandate. There's a lot that's coming out in the presentation that we get reports coming from the departments and its entities. So I think I would like a presentation that's completely just centered on what the mandate of Operation Vulindlela is as regards DCDT and what they are doing in addition to that, or to support the department, or to unblock challenges and shortcomings that we may be dealing with. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Honorable Singh. Honorable members, let me see if there's any other members before I provide my input. I'm also a member of the committee, so I might be your acting chair, but I also have the inputs to make. So there are no further hands, so I will then provide my input. Let me first again appreciate the presentation, and maybe colleagues, for the benefit of all of us and maybe also for fellow South Africans who are listening in, surrounding Operation Vulindlela at a high level in terms of what has its been role, because that theme seems to be coming through. Yesterday, I had an opportunity to read an article that's intended to be 26 minutes, but it took me an hour and a half to read. It's an article written by the CEO of Yellowwoods. His name is Adrian Eindhoven, and I will share it in the group. It was a thought leader lecture at the Stellenbosch University, and it's entitled, "After Years of Decline, Has South Africa Finally Turned Around?" It was a very thought-provoking article in which Adrian, the author, places Operation Vulindlela and the interventions of the presidency at the center of this, where he argues we have turned around. And amongst the streams he talks about, and I think the presenters had alluded to that, is around energy, building our energy capacity, opening up our ports, our logistics. And what I liked about it, it was empirically backed up. He provided evidence. I mean, we all know where we are in terms of the energy space. For example, ports, which was once, I think it was 3 weeks, was the delay to berth, now reduced to 2 or 3 days, which is within international norms. Another evidence he provides was, for example, at the border posts. Previously, trucks would have to wait 19 kilometers, now reduced to 3 kilometers. And he provides, and then he obviously speaks about digitization, because that also sits within the entire Operation Vulindlela. So I thought I'd place that before this committee. I think you would then appreciate the purpose of Operation Vulindlela and why certain elements the president has taken it under his direct oversight, because he believes that these are the ones that he would want to manage to unblock the blockages that are in the system. I thought I'd place that first. Maybe let me start by saying to the team that is here, one of the areas that we have observed both during our oversight last year, particularly in the Eastern Cape and generally across the board, is what concerns us is the interoperability between different departments. And the consequence of non-interoperability or lack thereof results in duplications, results in inefficiencies. We found, for example, when we went on oversight, you would find someone from the district sending an organization or an entity to come and connect, and then somebody from provincial government is doing the same. So everybody wants to get the same school connected, but they're not talking to each other. And that costs us money. That costs us, results in inefficiencies, wastage, etc., etc., etc. And that's been a challenge. And we need to put that. I need to place that at the front of where my arguments and my inputs are going. At the center of that, and maybe then placing that in the middle of it is talking to interoperabilities, because colleagues have indicated they're trying to place how and where does the DSU fit, and how does it what is its interoperability with the department, and then I would then bring it down to two particular departments in particular. And the first one, maybe I would like to talk then to SETA. We understand that the limitations faced by SETA are well known in the presidency, and the roadmap mentions revisions to the SETA MOU. Now, given that SETA's historical role as enshrined in the law as the main IT provider for government, what functions are being taken away from SETA by this new digital architecture, especially considering the policy to decentralize key functions from SETA implemented by the minister? And maybe what is SETA's clarified mandate with this reform structure? So this is very important for us, honorable members and colleagues, because we've just received the presentation from SETA last week, in which we wanted SETA to indicate to us, Gigati, how have you improved since our emergency oversight last year in December? And we all agreed when we received the presentation that SETA has made progress and is making progress. And we also then agreed that when entities criticize SETA, we also then want SETA to be in that room so that SETA can respond. So my question then is the DSU talking to the department and through the department to SETA? Are we placing SETA at the front as a partner in this project? We've also last week received, was it last week or the week before, from SETA? They have, and I think they piloted it or they launched it at the GovTech, and I had the opportunity of creating my first digital ID, the SETA the Super App, which, if I process it, seeks to achieve pretty much the same thing that the My Myzansi app is trying to achieve. So are we duplicating? I think we need to have that critical conversation. I would say we need to have the time out and we need to talk to each other. Okay. Similarly, that is around, if we talk of digitizing of payments. Now, has a conversation started taking place with the Postbank? I mean, the Postbank does not need full banking license, as it does disburse and pay out social grants. Are we talking to Postbank as we speak to digital payments? This is an entity of ours that this committee is supporting to ultimately achieve its license. And again, in this theme of interoperability, it would be amiss of us if Postbank, as an entity under the department, is not brought on board in this journey of digitization and digital payments. They should, in my view, be able to play a critical role for us, and it will also then assist the Postbank to achieve the critical volumes and critical mass it needs to achieve, because we are always talking about where's the government to government business. And that's another area we've been lacking. We haven't government to government business has got so much of volumes to build efficiencies, to create employment, but somehow we ignore government to government business and we look outside, whereas we have those volumes. So I thought it would be important for me to place those two entities of the department in the middle of this conversation. And maybe then to also echo what my colleagues have echoed is maybe provide us more details around the roles and the decision-making powers of the interdepartmental working group and the digital services unit. Maybe additionally, what mechanisms are in place to promote collaboration, not only between these bodies, but also with committees like this committee. As the Portfolio Committee of Communications and Digital Technologies, we haven't received comprehensive briefings from the DSU, especially regarding how these mechanisms address this. The other concern will then fall around budgetary. This entire process has to be funded. What is the role of the DSU? How is it funded? And then what are the limitations where the product development has to be done? Surely it can't be sitting under the DSU, because someone has to approve the budget. If we're going into product development, implementation, rollout, take us into confidence as to what is your role, given the fact that I, maybe because of my reading yesterday, understand the role of the president is to really push start and unblock these clogs. But then what is your limitation? Because there are budgetary constraints. And then that is where then does the department pick up the budget to see through this entire digital roadmap process of I'm placing the budgeting and the funding of that. An area I am beginning to have sleepless nights is the issue surrounding data sovereignty and the ownership of data. One of my biggest fears is given the geopolitical space that we are in, and we all know nobody is coming to collect the presidency of the G20. We know we are in a very delicate geopolitical space. More than ever before, data protection, data sovereignty, ownership of data is crucial. How then does the DSU, as you embark on this journey, consider the geopolitical circumstances and the important emphasis of us owning this data? Where will it be sitting? Is it going to be sitting on some cloud? Do we have that cloud? Or is it going to be sitting in some data exchange place that is stored beneath some mountains that protects the data of South Africa? We need to have this deeper conversation. It is something that we must be seized with as a committee, and certainly I believe the DSU, as you create this vision of My Myzansi app, which will have everything about Tembi or about Sizwe or Sipho from that birth to death, but where will that information be stored? Maybe then, as I maybe will want to pause, on the DSU matter, on some of the anticipated or already present challenges, the roadmap implies significant investment. Could you maybe detail the secured and projected funding for the core DPI initiatives for the next 3 to 5 years? And maybe are there any offtake agreements in place or vendor lock-in frameworks that are tied to such commitments? Maybe let me pause at this stage and hand back just to make sure that I've covered the issue surrounding. Oh yes, one very important element, and this was during my my visit to India in April, representing the committee at the Global Tech, in which, as you rightly pointed out, India is being at the forefront of the DPI journey, being able to bring in almost 1 billion of their population in this entire digital ID, digital payments, to this extent that if you go to an honorary vendor, there's digital payments taking place and they all have digital ID. But that didn't come overnight, and we know that was precipitated largely because there was a gap in the system of India, and that was largely around social grant payments. There was a gap in that it was not reaching the intended recipient. And their entire Aadhaar and the DPI spoke to that particular problem, almost like a Lego system. The entire DPI is built on a Lego. So they spoke to a problem statement, the leakage in the in the social grant, and they've overcome that, and now they're running an amazing system. But it was met with resistance from people around digital ID, and that was the point I was going to make. This vision of digital ID, digital payments, etc., is there. But one of the challenges we face is getting South Africans to buy into that vision. Have we started tilling the soil, softening it, creating the awareness around its benefits so that we can mitigate the conspiracy theories that conspiracy theories that emanate, that government wants to take away our money, our information will be controlled, we become like robots. That entire media campaign needs to be managed, and maybe linked to that as we embark on the DPI. What then, in your opinion, will be this meta, what is it called, that problem that you find is consistent across the board? In the case of India, it was getting the digital ID right so that we know we are speaking to the right person when we disperse, for example, social grants. What then would you think, when we develop this roadmap, will be that problem that cuts across all our departments that maybe we would want to then address with this DPI journey? I hope I haven't been everywhere, but you kind of like been able to grasp the content, what I was trying to place before you. Honorable Shabeleng, I will now, before I invited, I said, let me allow Honorable Shabeleng. He likes to come after the chairperson has spoken. Honorable Shabeleng, over to you.
Chair, I always appreciate your
You
input,
must call him to order, though, Chair. What the honorable member is always doing is not acceptable. It shouldn't be. You must call him to order. I've been counting. I counted. It's countless times now, Chairperson.
Honorable Shabeleng.
No, I think no, Chair. No, Chair. You guys are just conflicting me unnecessarily now. Am I audible?
You assist us. Yes, you are audible.
Am I honorable? Maybe I must reserve my comments because I wasn't trying to speak after you, Chair. I just noticed that when I raised my hand, because I'm in court, and as a result, I was able to even engage on this presentation. So it hasn't been easy, almost multitasking this thing. So it wasn't the intention, indeed. And Honorable Delisha, I think, is just worked up for unobvious reasons, but let me render my apologies on that one. It was not the intention, Chair, but I did actually, enjoy your summary on this part. I think two concerns maybe I must just raise up front with regards to the presentation. One, we welcome the presentation. It's good, visionary. It gives us clarity in terms of the ICT sector, where the government actually from the president's side is planning towards. It's really well welcomed. It's got really strong ambition, focus, and I do see elements of the plan from what I actually have experienced before. And I think maybe Rudy's influence and a few other people has been very strong there, because it similarly looks at government from almost a process where you want to fasten process and make sure that things happen at a project management level. This has happened before with Project Pakisa, which I was part of at some point, and Rudy was part of the Project Pakisa, where they backed up what can actually be fast-tracked in terms of unlocking the backlogs, as well as issues relating to how government can be expedient and deliver services to people and look at it from a project point of view. So I'm quite appreciative of the project in a sense that Vulindlela is looking at a similar approach and is looking at expediting and is looking at actually unlocking roadblocks and stuff. So one would appreciate that a particular approach and particular insight into the whole thing. Again, we just received this presentation yesterday, so I didn't really get interrogating onto it. Our study group hasn't been able to give input on it. So I'll just say to myself, to everybody, to say, look, one, we would appreciate the fact that if we could be given this project that has been identified in terms of project packages, what do they mean at the project packages level? Like, for instance, when we are talking about rolling out of the payment of SASSA, what does it mean in relation to the presidency, in relation to what Honorable Glelisha actually did mention, that is there no conflict with regards to Treasury now being made the key custodian of rolling out, for instance, payments of SASSA grants and stuff? Wasn't this supposed to have been relegated to a post-bank environment where agreements within interstate entities can actually be happening? Issues such as digitization, digital ID, healthcare, digital healthcare records, looking at the whole digitization or e-government systems where now the government is moving from paper trail to now digitalizing everything. We're looking at, for instance, the court systems, court records, etc. We're looking at information, processes where this particular plan, it needs to be summarized in packages of ICT space packages when we're looking at it. The connectivity at schools, what does that mean? Because we already have connectivity projects like the OSA Connect and other things. We've got the rollout projects that they are looking at in terms of connectivity for broadband for schools, for TVTs, broadband for communities. Where do we locate the view and the vision of Project Pakisa in terms of structured sort of key project outcomes? Right now, it's an overarching vision of what Project Pakisa would love to do. Project the Vulindlela would like to do, but it does not give a packaged project of saying, for instance, the connectivity crisis of South Africa's broadband crisis. This is the overarching view. What do we want to do? These are the projects that we're identifying, etc. These are the departments that will be working with us. These are the entities that will be helping us to implement. The other view we have is we would like to caution these issues of extreme over-privatization of our state. We cannot, at this level, go at the point where everything else is privatized. And whenever we're talking about projects that are government-related, particular budget-related, it's always rendered towards interest of private sector. We know some of this private sector participated in helping the president in his campaign and funding it, but doesn't mean we have to privatize the whole state and make sure that every service is taken out of the public sector's arena. It's now privatized in order to ensure that the private sector can own a chunk of government-related programs. So very, very strong. Some of these things, we are of the view that should stay and remain within the purview of the state. Your post office is there. You've got the programs around the SA Connect. You've got the CASA. You've got the likes of Centec. You've got the likes of CETA. You've got all of these entities that are doing digital technologies and solutions, etc. That should be empowered with Project Vulindlela and become the key drivers, rather than just people who are now going to now be giving away the large chunk of the value and not creating the necessary jobs or the economic impetus that we need. And the issue of our data sovereignty, you did mention on it, so I'm not going to run through to it. Let's be given a view as to, do we have data sovereignty? Is it going to be a database in South Africa, or we are going to be buying cloud space and then working with the other multinationals to actually privatize our data in the South African context of it? And then the last part of it is the project milestones. Each project must be given to us in a budget format. Already this was part of the Project Vulindlela, was already highlighted in the president's speech with regards to State of the Nation address. So now we want to see the budget line items of that particular spending on the ICT side of it and which projects, and then packaged in that whole thing. So I don't want to take too much time in really going into it, but based on what was presented, we appreciate the presentation. It was quite comprehensive, quite intensive, and it really is futuristic. It looks at ambitions that we want to see. We're just cautioning against the over-privatization of this particular program. It must be government-led, it must be state-led, it must be really national interest focused, and it must go to the bottom of how is it going to benefit our people. The social dividend for us, the really where our people benefit is where they are going to get the services, and the services, how it's going to work for them. And the complexities of it, not everybody has the digital capability. How are we going to empower our people to make sure that they can work on these platforms, they can engage on it, and bring services to people in rural areas without having to burden them with waiting for years until government provides the services? I'm going to hold it on that one, Chair. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Honorable Shabaleng. Let me then hand back to the team. Maybe, Rudy, let me hand to you. And through from you, you can lead the responses, and then we'll end it up with DG Nonkobela from the department. Rudy, let me hand back to you.
Thank you, Honourable Chair, and thanks, Honourable members, for those pertinent and pointed questions and comments. I perhaps wanted to start off, Honourable Subrathi, with your comments that you made earlier on, and I would allow the team to respond on the specific areas related to OV in the context of the digital transformation. But the way we've set up OV is particularly to try and deal with the overall coordination and the role of the presidency to play its strategic role as the center of government. Operation Vulindlela is not an implementation structure, and all its structures, even the DSU, is not an implementation structure. It's intended to be a coordinating structure and to support implementation. The implementation functions and role, Honourable Chair and members, remains that of the entities and of the line departments. That's an important and critical explanation that I have to give. That we do not want to play that role because it's not our mandate. Mandates are that which is provided in legislation or in various policy documents that, of course, are adopted by you as honourable members, and give that impetus to the different departments. So ours is to do that, but it's also quite critical that it's not simply just the coordinating roles. Ours is to be able to ensure, as you see, with the timeframes that we do and quite strict monitoring and evaluation tools that we have in our an array of different accountability measures, that for us accountability is quite an important part. So while we coordinate, while we provide support for implementation, mobilize resources and capacity where there is a shortage on that, ours is to provide that leadership, but also to ensure that we provide that level of accountability to entities and departments. And that's quite an important part in the success of the work that we've done. We provide quarterly updates, and perhaps not a matter for this portfolio committee, but certainly a portfolio committee is able to look at Operation Vulindlela website, and we can share that. You can see the transparency that we do provide on the quarterly performance of each of the distinct 7 programs in relation to what was adopted and committed to by the national government, of course. And that's an important part of it. For us, digital transformation is no different. It is, again, a partnership role that we've got to play, and that the implementing departments, even DSDT, as an important part of the digital transformation roadmap, as a distinct function and role that is defined within its regulatory mandate. But let's use, for example, digital identification. The Minister of Home Affairs has specific legislation assigned that is responsible for him or her to be able to implement that. Similar for the Department of Transport, the minister there also has distinct and specific legislation assigned to her or he that would do that. And I thought that sort of distinction is quite important, because sometimes this can be quite a grey area, Honourable Chair, where people think that the presidency is running everything and implementing everything and usurping the mandates. That's certainly not the case. And this is precisely why I think for us coming here, led by Minister Malatsi, the DG of the department and us, is to show that distinct and important integrated role from the way that we got to see how Operation Vulindlela is implemented. And as I'd offered to you, Honourable Chair, I think it would be useful. I thought Honourable Chabaleng's point at the end, perhaps it would be useful for the portfolio committee to have a separate session, and again at your time and whenever, to get a better sense of how Operation Vulindlela actually operates, and some of the successes, some of the challenges, some of the misconceptions as well, right? Because I thought when you were doing your introductory note to this, Honourable Chair, Subrathi, I thought that was an important part when you were quoting someone, and maybe some honourable members may not feel happy if you quote a business person. There are many others that we can quote as well. But I thought perhaps just an offer from myself as the as the lead on Operation Vulindlela, or the co-lead on Operation Vulindlela, that we are offering to be able to deal with, not only understanding how it works, but understanding the methodology, the approach, so that honorable members have a good sense of why this is such an important and pertinent way of trying to resolve a national interest matter like digital transformation, and ensuring that we create an inclusive society using digital means and methods to be able to ensure that has happened. I thought perhaps if that's okay, Honorable Subrathi, that would be a useful segue for Kule and the rest of the team to come in and answer those specific questions that honorable members have, for example, pointed to in relation to the actual slide deck presentation. Thank you, Honorable Subrathi.
Thank you, Rudy. Kule, can I invite you?
No, thank you so much, Honorable Chair. I hope I'm audible, and I'd like to thank the honorable members for the questions that they have asked. I think Rudy has covered in some way how Operation Vulindlela works, and we obviously try to take that way of working into this particular piece of work, especially around digital transformation. The only thing that I'd add, Honorable Chair, and I think it really speaks to some of the questions that had come up from some of the honorable members, is that the approach is a different approach to how we normally do things in government. I spoke quite a bit about the fact that where we are in terms of implementation is a lot on prototyping, thinking through, and we've called it a sandboxing approach, which is a kind of technology terminology, which means that you test different ways of working. And so while, of course, the mandate sits with the department, it sits there, we're working with the departmental teams to ensure that, for example, we are testing technology X versus technology Y in the best way possible. So, and in some sense, the DSU will have a role in that, but ultimately, when it comes to issues of procurement and the likes, the departments handle that because naturally they have the mandate to do so. The second thing that I think the DSU also does advise on, because this becomes, I think, really the critical pillar, is the issue of standards. And I must state that it is an advisory role because you must have common standards across government if you're going to support DPI going forward. One department cannot have its own set of standards versus another, because when you try to integrate those particular systems, the reality of the situation is that it will not work and it will undermine the vision at the end of the day. So that's also another area in which there is some advisory support in that regard. Just to maybe go through some of the issues around the buy-in. If we look at the buy-in, as mentioned by both the minister and the DG, we do have the IMC that has, I think, more than 10, 12 or 15 ministries that are represented there. So at a political level, certainly, well, the objectives of the roadmap are understood. And of course, some of the key departments that have been identified in the first phase also the second phase are there. At the IDWG, the Interdepartmental Working Group, which is led by the DG and the President, co-chaired by the DG of the DCDT and in the DG of National Treasury, you have multiple departments and multiple entities that are there across the government system, so that you can there's an understanding of what this work is going to entail, and at which point it will affect a particular departments going forward. The second one is also around the issue of the municipalities. I think it is quite an important thing. We thought it was quite critical because we're also trying to manage expectations. We're also mindful that we are building a plane as we fly it, in some sense, that we needed to start with national government services, because that is maybe in some instances where we have influence in the sphere. Get those done very well, and then the idea is that we then cascade. It doesn't mean, however, that we're not engaging with municipalities, we're not engaging with provinces. One of the key, I think, enablers of some of this work is really through the the Government IT Officers Council. They've played a central role. Not only are they aware of the roadmap, but they have also, in its instance, influenced the roadmap and also been able to take it into their respective environments as well. So we've had a number of sessions with provinces, conversations with provinces, providing advice where possible about what is coming. The idea, as indicated, is that it should support municipalities, it should support the provinces, but for the sake of being able to show progress against a dedicated program, we've started with national government going forward. I think the question really has covered the question about the interface with the DCDT. We think we have quite a close relationship with the department. Of course, through the IDWG, through the IMC, there is constantly the meetings between the two departments, and in fact, in some of the areas where they're a little bit more technical, you've also got the involvement of departmental staff and officials there as well. So we would say that the interface is actually quite good. I think as it speaks to the department is, of course, responsible for the implementation of some of these aspects. So I will get to the issue of CETA, but CETA is a prime example of that. The second one is also the policy making aspects as well, as it relates to supporting the DPI agenda. So the presidency and the DSU certainly does not create any policy that is driven by the particular departments as well. Perhaps where there are areas where there's kind of close collaboration is around particular reforms going forward. So, for example, one of the things that we are, and I think this covers one of the questions about the role of CETA, the mandate. One of the things that we've engaged CETA on this, so it's not anything that is new in this forum, is we want to understand in the long term, because we understand that CETA and other institutions, including the CSIR within government, have a critical role in terms of delivery. What is the institutional, I'd say, framework that is going to be required and configuration that is going to be required to actually drive this change beyond 2030? That is a piece of work that will be undertaken by the department, but certainly we can bring in particular support. And of course, we can also argue that just given the broader DPI roadmap, there are particular questions that we would like answered from that particular piece of work. The post bank, one of the first interactions we had with some of the key departments and entities was really with the post bank on an understanding. Certainly for us, there is a role that has to happen through payments, as it would happen through, I think, any other critical entity, especially that has accounts with millions of South Africans. The only thing that we do just need to make sure that we get further alignment there, because when the roadmap was drafted at the time, there was the difficulty of the fact that at the time the post bank was under business rescue, and there was the thought about the implications of if you were building things within the post bank, would it belong to the state or would it belong elsewhere? We're now out of that phase, and I think we can have a more kind of a discussion that takes us towards the post bank being responsible for some of those entities. But it is important to just state quickly, especially when it comes to payments, similar to Home Affairs or anything else, that the payments ecosystem, especially its modernization and its management, does sit with the South African Reserve Bank. That is a mandate that we cannot change at this point. And so a big part of this work, or similar to resourcing, is really about how do you work with the existing mandates, but also at the same time leveraging also the budgets that exist within those particular departments as well. Now, as it relates to the issue of literacy rates, I'm just going through the questions as I had noted them down. We agree. The roadmap's role, or the work that we're trying to do, is not to claim that we're going to solve for everything that is digital. within a 5-year period, because there is a long road. But really, just going back to some of the questions and the comments that were made by in the last question, it is to really answer one thing, and that thing is that the experience that South Africans have with digital services is a very mixed experience, and I'm putting it lightly when I say that. The experience that South Africans have when they're accessing whether it is key documentation or applying for services is, I think, an experience that we all can agree can be improved. And we know, whether it is the work that's been done by the GCIS or multiple partners outside of governments, that there is a trust deficit between the services that we offer as government and citizens. So ultimately, the ultimate aim of this work is to make sure that we can transform that experience, that, I keep speaking about seamless services, that when a South African goes online, whether it's on an app or it's in another platform as well, that they're able to get their things done quickly, because ultimately what that does is that it actually can send a clear message to citizens that services can be seamless, they can be efficient, and in fact, the trust matrix between them and government increases. That is really the thing that we're trying to answer for. Unlike, Honorable Chair, unlike India, we were not starting from scratch. Many of these things aren't starting from scratch. We've got a ID system that covers many South Africans. It's really about getting it digitized. So some of those challenges that India were facing are not necessarily challenges that we're facing. But I think what is similar to India and maybe other parts of the world, including Brazil, is that we think that our social protection systems can work more efficiently, and certainly we think that people can access those services without necessarily going to a central government platform. There was a question about what is the implications for South Africans that do not necessarily have smartphones, and I think one of the things that we want to do is make sure that there is an integration with the USSD, so that will continue to play a role. It also does not mean, for example, so on the most basic of phones, people can still access their services. The second one, of course, is that it does not mean that if you are digitizing government services, that the role of the offices of government offices necessarily does not, it doesn't have a role. It still does. Again, when we did a bit of a tour to India, one of the great learnings for me and the things that sat with me was how they were using offices. These became places of education and they became places of onboarding, right? And a citizen made a choice whether they wanted to come there or not. And in some instances, I mean, we're not there yet, but in equivalents of puzzle shops, where, for example, there's an understanding that there might be one, smartphone per 100 people in a rural setting. You also have interfaces that allows people to access their data in a safe manner going forward. So we understand that this digital transformation is not just going to be about the soft infrastructure, but is also going to be about offices and hard infrastructure. And one of the reforms that we've taken forward, or rather pieces of work that we're taking forward, is a costing exercise between now and 2025, now and 2030, about what this is going to cost, what exists within the government balance sheet, and perhaps we might have to look at the likes of DFIs, especially within the state, that might actually support us with the implementation going forward. So this has really become a key component for us. But we thought that in the absence of, let's say, dedicated budgets, because we understand that that is a risk, we can still leverage on the existing budgets, on the existing mandates, to make sure that we move. For us, it shouldn't be, it shouldn't be an excuse for us not to make work. Just to answer the question about whether, we are moving slowly. When we got the roadmap, when we, obviously we took it to cabinet and we, took it to the various, the IMC and elsewhere, and we looked at the timelines, and then we went back to some of those countries that we were learning from. They indicated that if we were to get this done in 5 years, and we're quite confident we can, this would be the fastest implementation of DPI that has been seen in the world. So even though we talk about it, even if we talk about India, for example, or Brazil moving fairly quickly, it is quite important to mention that a lot of the background, the infrastructure, the investment in people has actually taken multiple decades. I mean, if you speak to the Brazilians, they tell you you a 30-year journey. So it's not to make excuses for the roadmap, but rather to say that if we're talking about 5 years, having 20 services that includes underlining reforms, budget allocations, all of that, thinking about mandates differently, and we managed to do that 5 years, we really have moved in a particular way. Our first year was always going to be about piloting. Our first year was always going to be about socializing the roadmap within government, making sure that the governance mechanisms are working well. And I think in some sense, we've actually gone above those timelines. We've actually got working, implementable prototypes that are up and running. And next year, it becomes about mass adoption. So we think, according to the roadmap, we're moving in the nature. One of the I think feedbacks we did get from Cabinet, for example, was just saying that some of the use cases and these are projects that Honorable Chabaleng was speaking about, we could bring them forward because we had some that were sitting in 2027 and 2028. And for example, working with NSFAS was one of those. We've brought those forward a little bit, and we're already working with NSFAS from now on. But again, a lot of this work is iterative in the sense that where departments are putting up their hand very quickly and saying, actually, we need the support now, we try to make the teams available. In terms of data sovereignty and how the teams actually function, the one thing that I'd like to stress with this work is that the function of the work is not to privatize, I think, the functions of government. In fact, the way that we run our data systems in government, our procurement systems in government, especially from an IT, is that we've largely privatized them. This is actually about making sure that the state can then own some of the key digital public infrastructure. So whether it is the payments layer and the work that the SARB is doing there, the data exchange, the services portal, the minimum requirement is that it is owned and driven by the state. Now, you can have aspects of procurement because you recognize that there are basic components that can be done better. Even the ad hoc system, Honorable Subrathi, has elements that works with big kind of private sector players as well, right? Even something that is as critical to the Indian government as that. So there's, but again, that is the mandate of the department to determine what it wants to do there. But you know, there is a report that has been done by the Government Information Technology Officers Council that really states that if you look at IT skills, and these are core IT skills, not adjacent, there's about 3,000 or so to 4,000 in national government that sit there. As a government, we need much more. And you can then understand why government has become, as the president once called it, a holder of contracts. So building that capacity is going to be, I think, a big part of the work that we want to do. And this brings us to how we work. So, for example, if you look at the prototype around the services app, for example, you are working with people from the relevant departments in the squads. You know, whether you're pulling people from GCIS, we work very closely with the team there, ourselves in the presidency, and any department which has an interdependency, whether that is, for example, when we are doing things around the, let's say if we work with education, for example, we would bring in the IT team there. So it is multidisciplinary teams across government, but also what we will also do as well is also bring in some people from outside that we work with that have special expertise that are also able to help us. So it is a mixed multidisciplinary team of the state, mostly the state, and then also some people who do support us, who do come in from outside as well. And that's how we plan to run it, because the idea is that there should be a skills transfer, knowledge of skills, but also a way of working that goes across departments and doesn't just silo the way of working. Data sovereignty, that is will be led by the legislation and the and the regulations that are there, the cloud policies that exist within the country that are driven by the DCDT state very clearly what we can and cannot do. The data will be stored in South Africa, and of course, being able to finalize an MOU with our colleagues at CETA, but also we've also got our colleagues at the CSR is going to be quite important because, of course, they have the hosting capability as well. Where there are areas where you might have to work with a hyperscaler, there are also clear regulations of how you do that. That information must be stored in the country. And I think as a result of that, we've actually seen a building of multiple data centers, especially of the massive hyperscalers in the country, because we've actually set through the commercial imperative. As it relates to partnerships, the roadmap sets out, I think, very broadly that partnerships might be necessary. Of course, from a procurement perspective, again, just to stress that that is the responsibility of the departments and the implementers, that from that perspective, there might be areas where you still do have to procure going forward. But when we talk about partnerships, we're actually saying, how do you bring in how do you leverage rather the capacity, maybe some of the trust that some of the private sector companies might already have with millions of South Africans to make sure that you can move the work that we're trying to do. So, for example, an example is maybe the banks, because that had been mentioned by the honourable members. If you look at the banking apps that are used by South Africans, about 30 or so million South Africans use those every day. We also have a situation where some government services are already offered on those particular services. It's important to say that that is not a service that is owned by the banks, but rather that the bank pays the department, so the department service can be offered on those particular platforms. And so there is something to think about. Obviously, we've got the centralized platform. We want to make sure that South Africans enter through that platform. But for example, if someone is using an application or not, is there the option that they could also access via that avenue? The important thing for us is that these services are accessible, whether it is to poor South Africans or South Africans who have more access going forward. This is not a procurement relationship. It's rather about how do you leverage perhaps the trust and the avenues that other partners, even in civil society, would have to make sure that all the services are able to reach the people who they should. But also what it does is it creates a revenue model for government, because these are ultimately government systems that the private sector would be using. And there would have to be some kind of agreement as to how they pay government to use that going forward. But just to say lastly that there is, at the moment, it is still a concept within the roadmap, still quite open. We've of course been approached by multiple industries, including the telecommunications industry, that says who recognize that if we can get this right, it also means that people are using need more cell phones and whatever the case. And so the question is, we don't own mobile data operators as a state. And so we would push them to make sure that on their social responsibility, they're able to offer that 3G, 4G, 5G bandwidth, especially in places like rural areas. So there are places where business has a particular role that is aligned to their mandate, and places where the state has a role. But for us, it's not about confusing them. It's rather about how do you work with others to make sure that you can reach people in the best way possible going forward. I know I've spoken for some bit, but maybe the last one I'd like to touch on, and again, very happy to come back to this committee so that we can maybe spend a little bit more time on some of the issues, is on the how do we make sure we don't leave South Africans behind. This is something that we are also worried about ourselves, and our sense is that you will need, a big communications campaign to make sure that South Africans understand the benefit of this. For us, it's twofold, Honourable Chair. One is the fact that you have obviously a communications campaign that dispels, I think, some of the worries that are out there. Also, it's good to remind South Africans in any case that we already have forms of digitization. When you apply for an SRD 350, you are providing information so we've already proven ourselves the ability for ourselves to actually safeguard South Africans' data. But the second one is also to make sure that you are actually delivering something that works, because once something works and it actually shows value in people's lives very quickly, as other services have done, I think it really does allay the fear. If something doesn't work and then it's also using people's data, then obviously people become further heightened. So I think for us, it's a dual strategy. And luckily, we live in a country that has run quite incredible campaigns. If one thinks about both the HIV, TB campaigns that were run in the early 2000s and so on, that were able to bring society around, we think it's also something that's possible. And we're slowly trying to develop kind of a communications competency that once we're ready to launch can really support the work going forward, but also is not just the responsibility of government, but also some of our partners going forward. I am not sure if I've covered all of the issues. Oh, I think the last one was just around your presentation of CETA, the role of CETA, and so on. Ours, as I've indicated, the roadmap indicates that CETA does have a role. Ours is really not to take over the role of CETA. The DSU does not involve itself in procurement. It does not involve itself in, I think, the mandates of other particular departments. We are sandboxing, and the reason for sandboxing is that when we engage with departments, we engage with entities, and they say to us, we can't do things X, Y, and Z. We say, but actually there's different ways of doing it. We've seen it around the world. We've also been able to do X, and is it possible that we align the policy, the regulations, so that we can do things in a more streamlined process going forward? Because what we tend to find is that if you are not in the detail yourself and do not have the technical expertise in the center of government, things can go wrong. And so it's just making sure that some of our advisory support is there. But I think just to allay any fears that might be there will be one government app. That is a critical principle for us. There will not be duplications. And two, just to say that certainly the MOU that we will be getting into with CETA, which we should finalize hopefully by the end of the month, will give clear responsibilities of who's responsible for what in terms of that particular app going forward. And then second, just to say that CETA is involved within the IDWG, the Interdepartmental Working Group as well. And so really, I think they're abreast to what the roadmap seeks to achieve and how the build is going forward. With that, Honorable Chair, because I understand I've taken much time, I'll leave it at that. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Kule, for your very comprehensive and detailed responses, which is welcomed and appreciated. Particularly your last comment surrounding CETA, and maybe as I invite DG to respond, I also note, DG, that the chairperson of CETA board, Ms. Senzani Modau, is on the board, as well as acting CEO, Mr. Gopal Reddy. So you might want to just if you consider to bring them in, that I'd leave it at your discretion as I hand back to you, DG, to lead the final comments from the department side.
Thank you very much, Chair. And perhaps then may I hand over to the Chair of CETA for any inclusion in comments on the matters that were raised. I would like to come back, Chair, and respond on some of the issues related to access and affordability, as well as the skills issue. But most of the issues have been covered, both by Rudy as well as Kule. I may hand over to the Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, DG, and good morning, or actually afternoon now, to you, Honorable Chair and Honorable members. I think, as the DG has alluded, a lot of the issues have been responded to. I think I'll just add to the fact that there has been engagements with the colleagues from DSU through the department, and those engagements are continuing to ensure alignment in the good digital transformation strategy that has been presented this morning. I wouldn't want to add more on that, Chair. I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Thank you. DG, back to you.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Thank you very much to the Chair as well of CETA. Not that Chair. Chair, there's too many chairs on the platform. And I'm sitting on a chair. Chair, then perhaps maybe to firstly respond on Honorable Bodlani, I think the issue that she raised a concern about was the analog switch off. And immediately, I think for me, and I thought Ruth was going to talk about it, about how in the first round of Operations Vulindlela, we were successful with regards to the spectrum optioning. So my response, though, is in two parts, because I think there's a sober response as well, Honorable Bodlani. So while the spectrum has been allocated, so we've freed up the critical spectrum that you would need in as far as then the 4G and 5G rollout in the country. However, it's still imperative, and I think Honorable Bodlani on this point, it's very imperative that we digitize the country. And therefore, the issue of a digital platform, as far as broadcasting, is also going to be very key. And the fact that we are still lagging behind or still sitting with analog, we are basically missing an opportunity of having more of the digital as well as social programs online, including, as I said, on these broadcasting platforms. We've seen during COVID, when we had the adverse impact with the lockdown and people not being able to go to school. And one of the designs with regards to the DTT is that you would have a dedicated educational channel. You would also have other dedicated channels like health, the issue of, and other social programs that are very key. So yes, it is important. And we would also probably even have the opportunity with regards to the integration of these government programs online as well. And then so we are working hard with all the players in as far as fast tracking the analog switch off. The issue that was raised on the SAPO partnership, as well as I think the Post Bank that was raised by you, Honorable Chair, as well as Honorable Bodlani. SAPO is a critical player in this ecosystem. I think the opportunities that we're going to get there with regards to the fact that SAPO is the only national credited institution as far as then the authentication center, as well as the trust center. So you would have seen in the partnership program that we've issued that is one of the areas that we're looking at in as far as making sure that we improve the performance of the post office in this regard. The CETA is also assisting SAPO with regards to reviving the trust center as well. So just again to illustrate that within our portfolio, the entities are working collaboratively to support each other. The issue with regards to the digital payment, Chair, it's been noted. Again, yes, the Post Bank, we will have an engagement in as far as ensuring the inclusion of it, as far as then the payment system is concerned as well. And then perhaps to address the issue that Honorable Felicia raised, the issue of literacy or digital literacy is absolutely critical. So there's a couple of issues that Honorable Felicia raised. The one part with what we're working on in government, as far as onboarding services, having an interoperable system, having a digital identity, just payment, Chair, looks the easy part. Social awareness, ensuring educated workforce within government as well as public is going to be an ongoing issue, because part of then this education, this digital literacy, fundamentally talks to even the cybersecurity. How do you protect your data online? How do you navigate all of these? Now that you're going to have a single view of the citizen, how do you ensure that the citizen is able to actually efficiently utilize that? Then there's going to be the issue, I think again, Honorable Felicia talked about on the affordability of the devices. As you would know, in the department, we're already working on that particular program. as far as affordability of devices, paper devices. Earlier on this year, you would have seen, honorable members, that after the engagement we had with National Treasury, the Minister of Finance announced the tax review with regards to the low end, sorry, let me not say cheaper, the low end smart devices. Over and above that now, that we've looked at these import duties, we are now looking at the massification of the production of these devices, or at least the assembling of them in the country. We know that there is capability in South Africa. And so now we're looking in terms of how to make sure that there's more of an uptake, especially in terms of your 4G, as well as your 5G devices to every single citizen. And so therefore, we're looking at negotiating what is the reasonable amount for that, and looking at other incentives for that. And as I said, the skills issue, we're working with various partners to assist us with regards to creating awareness at grassroots level, along with our institutions as well. Designing programs, we're also designing programs for the public servants. They also need to be reskill and upskill, and how to protect this data. We're also actually creating a new position within government departments, which is the Chief Data Officer, working with the Department of Public Service and Administration in this regard, and the GTO Council, who also they're part of the members of the interdepartmental working group. So the issue of, I think that was raised, of concern with the alignment of the respective roles and responsibility, I think Rudy spoke about it extensively, responding to Honorable Singh. But just to say that it is coordination. At times we are going to find anything with typical digitization, Chair, it's cross-cutting. So sometimes you will have to ask the question to say, is the Department of Communication the lead, simply because there's the word digital, or are we an enabler and ensuring that other government departments within their respective roles and mandate actually drive this issue? But what is so fundamental for us is the central coordination, which is being driven here. Perhaps just to take a step back, it is true that the department has been leading on the e-government, Chair, probably since about 2008, if you've seen in the presentation. The challenges that we encountered was, with utmost due respect to my fellow colleagues, but there was a lack of cooperation. We were going to government departments asking them to say, we want to port these services online, and we will be encountering issues of territory. Meanwhile, from a citizen perspective, they see us as a one government. So they're expecting us to work in unison. The involvement of presidency, and this discussion has been underway since about 2018, has assisted us in as far as unlocking that particular red tape. So the cooperation, we're finding it much more easier. And therefore now that's why there's such a much more fast-track role and in execution with regards to this digital transformation roadmap. Data sovereignty is absolutely key for us. We've got the capabilities in terms of where we're storing government data. It is going to be at CETA. We're also looking at other alternatives as far as government institutions as well, in as far as keeping that data. So we've also at the department now working on a framework as to how, as government departments, we're going to share the data. As you know, we'll have to make sure that we set up the data sets and also be able to classify what that data is, a lot in line with the data and cloud policy that the department issued and cabinet approved in 2024. And then, so the last issue, Chair, relates to, the most important, Honorable Chabeleng put the money on it, or the money not. When you ask about the issue that the project milestones in the budget line, we must be open and transparent in this platform to then say, one of the challenges that we've had, because we were conceptualizing this project, and we thought year one was going to be that, until obviously we went to present it in cabinet and the president said he wants execution. And that was post the funding allocation. So now we're engaging National Treasury for adequate funding for this project going forward. So up until now, it's only been the funding that has been allocated in terms of the E&E in the respective departments. And we don't have a central budget as well as funding for the rollout of this project. So we are in the process of engaging National Treasury to ensure that there would be adequate funding in the outer years as well. And that will also assist us in making sure that as government, we preserve the issue of government sovereignty or the government having control on this project. So thank you very much, Chair. I think we've responded on all the comments and questions.
Thank you, DG, and thank you to the team once again, led by the minister who has left, and the department officials. Let's also thank the seated chair that's had an opportunity to join us, as well as to Rudy and to Kule for your comprehensive presentation and an appreciation that as public servants, as elected public servants, honorable colleagues, we have a duty to ensure that we become the voice of the people. And I really want to appreciate the diverse input that we receive from the different honorable colleagues. For example, the issues surrounding literacy, affordability of phones, and these are issues that are touching the lives of people, and it gives me the appreciation of the diversity in our group when honorable members speak from these diverse backgrounds and we bring it together. We truly then are representing the interests of the people. Let me then, as I bring this session to an end, mention that we don't want to leave no one behind. Does include as well departments within our portfolio. We do not want to leave citizens behind, and we certainly don't want to leave any department behind. We must, arising out of this meeting, have a closer conversation. There must be a deeper conversation with CETA, with Postbank, and the concept of interoperability must be deepened. We must close the gaps. We cannot make the same mistakes again. We must, and I like what Kula you mentioned, there would be only one government app and one government solution, digital solution, and that's what we want to see. We don't want to see more than one. We want to see one universal app that we all as citizens can use. So for me, that is critical as we venture. And we would also love to see that in the tenure of this portfolio committee, which ends in 2029, we are able to achieve this journey of DPI, this envisioned journey of this single citizens app that serves all our people. And finally, maybe let's not feel shy. We will certainly, Rudy, consider taking you up on that offer about deepening our understanding of Operation Vulindlela and the DSU in particular. And finally, on the few times that I've met officials from India, both in India and more recently in the Africa Tech, there were officials from India who very readily indicated they want to share their journey with us. And if they're not driven monetarily, it would appear they're driven by a genuine intention to assist us. So we have partners like this who want to partner with us, who want to assist us. Let's call upon them and let us try and expedite this journey. Thank you so much, honorable colleagues and honorable members, for this wonderful engagement surrounding the DSU and